Welcome back to the Robert Stone Club channel. Today, we're diving into a forensic breakdown of what is, quite frankly, one of the most terrifying digital bank robberies in history. Now, this isn't your typical story about a clever phishing scam or somebody accidentally leaking their password. No, this explainer is a post-mortem of a microscopic line of code. Just a tiny error that sat silently in the dark for 5 whole years before suddenly triggering a 9-figure hardware wallet theft. We're going to retrace the timeline, analyze the exploit, and really dig into the autopsy of this digital catastrophe.
You know, what makes this exploit so incredibly tragic is the sheer irony of who was targeted. The victims here, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. I mean, they didn't click on sketchy email links. They weren't storing their passwords in a plain text file on their desktop. These were highly security-conscious individuals who did the responsible thing. They went out and bought an industry-standard, air-gapped Coldcard hardware wallet to protect their assets. But they were betrayed by a flaw so deeply embedded and so invisible that they literally never stood a chance.
To really understand the severity of this event, we have to talk about the number 41. On July 30th, 2026, over 1,000 completely separate, totally unlinked accounts were simultaneously drained of millions of dollars. And the entire execution of this massive, coordinated sweep, it took exactly 41 minutes. The precision here is just chilling. But here's the thing. The groundwork for those 41 minutes was actually laid years earlier. The fatal firmware update was pushed out on March 1st, 2021. So for 5 long years, this vulnerability just sat there, silently undetected in devices all around the world. Users were unknowingly generating totally flawed keys, entirely oblivious to the ticking time bomb sitting right there in their physical safes, right up until that sudden, violent execution in July 2026. Section 1. The Autopsy of a Mistake. Okay, let's dive into this and rewind the clock back to March 1st, 2021, to find out exactly what went wrong under the hood. The sheer simplicity of this failure is just staggering. A single build flag setting, it's called micropi_HW_enable RNG, was set to 0. That's it. A 0 instead of a 1. And this tiny, microscopic change accidentally disabled the specialized hardware chip that was designed to generate true random numbers. Now, I want to be absolutely explicitly clear here. This was a catastrophic human mistake. There was zero malicious intent by any developer or company involved. None. It was just a tragic oversight that slipped into firmware versions 4.0.1 through 4.1.9. So with that main randomness chip accidentally turned off, the device didn't just crash or refuse to work. Instead, it silently fell back to a secondary, much weaker method for creating new seed phrases. Rather than using the secure cryptographic hardware, it just relied on 2 highly predictable pieces of information: the device's public serial number and a really simple hardware timer that just captured the exact millisecond the device was powered on. And this created a terrifying illusion of security. To the user, everything functioned totally normally. You plug it in, generate your 24-word seed phrase, painstakingly write it down on metal, and move your Bitcoin into cold storage. The private keys never once left the physical device. The vault doors were locked tight, but the foundation of the vault itself was basically made of glass. Because the seed phrase was generated using highly predictable data, it was fundamentally broken from the very first second it existed.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the mathematics. A truly secure wallet uses 256 bits of entropy. That creates a number of possible combinations so impossibly large, it's effectively infinite. Literally, the known universe would end before a computer could guess it. But this fallback method, it slashed that randomness down to just 40 bits of entropy. The pool of possible keys totally collapsed to roughly 1 trillion. By the way, if you're finding this breakdown helpful, please hit subscribe and drop a like so we can keep bringing you these deep dive crypto investigations. Now, getting back to it, to a human, 1 trillion sounds like a massive number, but to a computer, it is terrifyingly small.
In fact, for a dedicated attacker generating keys at a rate of 1 million per second, solving this exact math problem and cycling through all 1 trillion possible combinations would only take 13 days. That's it, a 13-day window to unlock a vault holding hundreds of millions of dollars. Section 2. The Mechanics of the Heist. The attackers obviously knew the math, but how did they actually capitalize on it? Well, the forensic methodology was brilliantly brutal in its efficiency. Step 1, they write software to systematically generate every single one of those trillion weak keys, all totally offline. Step 2, they take those generated public addresses and scan the public Bitcoin blockchain to see which ones actually hold funds. And then step 3, wait, watch,
and execute a massive simultaneous sweep. Because the attackers successfully regenerated the private keys from scratch, they completely bypassed the physical hardware. Think about that. They never needed to touch a single victim's actual device.
The financial damage was just immense, though to be fair, the exact ceiling is still being heavily analyzed. According to on-chain tracking, TRM Labs confirmed 1,816 Bitcoin stolen, valuing the theft at approximately $116 million. On the other hand, Galaxy Research confirmed a slightly lower initial sweep, but they suspect a fourth wave of undetected thefts occurred, bringing their estimated total up to 2,055 Bitcoin, which is about $130 million. So while the total figures do differ quite a bit between TRMM and Galaxy Research, the human cost is absolutely clear. The data shows the median loss was exactly 1 Bitcoin per victim.
Section 3. A historical pattern of fragility. While this incident is definitely a landmark case because of the specific hardware involved, looking at the wider context reveals that this is not just some isolated freak occurrence.
Sadly, the crypto space has a really painful history of catastrophic weak key generation. Just look back to 2022. A flaw in the random number generation of the Profanity Vanity address tool put $160 million at risk. Then in 2023, a Trust Wallet browser extension flaw generated predictable seed phrases, and that led to immediate thefts. Not to mention the ongoing dictionary attacks against poorly created brain wallets that sweep millions cumulatively year after year. Predictable seed phrases are a systemic recurring risk across the entire industry.
So how do you actually spot a vulnerability before it strikes? Well, you have to check for security hygiene. And this brilliantly illustrates why concepts like reproducible builds really matter. Look, if a project relies on closed-source code, avoids public security audits, or acts super dismissive toward community bug reports, you're essentially just trusting a black box. Reproducible builds let independent researchers actually verify that the code a company publishes is exactly what's running on your device. Also, every single unnecessary feature, like Bluetooth or complex apps, it just needlessly increases the attack surface. Section 4. The Defensive Playbook. Now, this brings us to the absolute most critical part of this explainer. How does the smart money, we're talking the institutional players and seasoned veterans, how do they avoid getting caught in these devastating sweeps? Well, it's simple. They remove the single point of failure entirely. First, they require multi-signature approvals, like a 2 of 3 setup. This means even if an attacker perfectly guesses a flawed key from one device, they literally can't move the funds with the other keys. Second, they diversify their hardware manufacturers, making sure a single bug at one company can't wipe out their entire portfolio. And finally, they bypass trust in the internal hardware completely by adding their own randomness. They'll physically roll casino-grade dice to manually generate the entropy for their seed phrase.
I really want to leave you with this lingering, uncomfortable lesson. If your hardware wallet generated a seed phrase during those 5 years on that specific vulnerable firmware, downloading a patch today will not save you. Sure, an update patches the device going forward, but a wallet created on affected firmware stays permanently affected. Remember, the seed itself was mathematically weak, not the device. The only true fix here is generating a completely new seed on a verified, patched device and migrating your assets entirely. It really begs the question, doesn't it? How much trust are you blindly placing in the silicon holding your future? Stay secure, and we'll see you in the next explainer.